It's almost an understatement to say that 2020 has been an extraordinary year, both globally and in Hong Kong. I expect many of us are attending today as Hong Kongers, interested to understand where we are now and what our future might look like. And we hugely appreciate having a city leader such as you to address us and share your thinking and vision, with honesty and with an appreciation of the challenges we face as we look forward. In particular, while many cities in North America and Europe have used the last few months as an opportunity to emphasize sustainability, here in Asia, we've seen far less of this, and hearing about a new emphasis on sustainable development and sustainable finance in Hong Kong is refreshing. And now, to provide further perspective, please welcome Dr. Richard Claydon. Richard will set out a thought-provoking narrative reflecting on this city and those challenges that it faces as it looks forward coming out of social unrest and COVID-19. What do we need if we are to survive and prosper as a global center? Also, following this talk, Richard will be taking questions, so please don't hesitate to post your questions on the platform. Richard, over to you.
Thank you, Eli, and thank you to ULI for inviting me here today. So the title of my talk is The Heart of Hong Kong, Feeling the City, Part 1. And first of all, I'm going to sort of put forward a question. Has Hong Kong developed something called a monopolistic mindset? And I'll start by talking about Steve Jobs, so one of the great innovators of our age. He, in the 1980s, went to look at Xerox. And Xerox at the time had such an advantage on developing graphical interfaces for computers. Jobs went to see them, and he said they didn't realize what they had. They had this incredible technology that actually the people running Xerox didn't understand. So they lost the computer industry from a position of absolute dominance, and Jobs copied it and it sort of became the future. So he argued that Xerox could have owned the entire computer industry. IBM and Microsoft could have been small players. Apple could have been a small player. Of course, Xerox didn't. And I'm going to use that example sort of to argue that maybe Hong Kong is in the same position. Hong Kong has been a monopoly for much of its recent history. So in East Asia, until the rise of post-colonial Singapore, so sort of 1965 onwards, Hong Kong was the dominant city, the dominant sort of developed city in the region, and in Greater China as well. Until 1998 and the Second Chinese Industrial Revolution, Hong Kong has become was the dominant developed city. So because it was so dominant, because there was no competition, there's a real possibility that a monopolistic mindset has developed. And again, as part of that, the built environment is monopolistic in tendency because it's so difficult for a new player to raise the money to come in and compete. And our Jobs argues in the monopolistic mindset, marketing and sales become the dominant part of the industry. New development is sort of dropped, and it's all about marketing and selling an existing product. So, for example, when Brand Hong Kong sort of branded Hong Kong as Asia's world city, this is a marketing exercise rather than an innovation exercise. So my big question is, like Xerox, has Hong Kong forgotten what made it great in the first place? And I'm arguing here that actually there are three cities that are competing with each other to be the great knowledge economies of Asia. One is Hong Kong, one is Singapore, and one will be post-petroleum Dubai. They will all be resource light, and they will all be driven by knowledge. So I think that Hong Kong's forgotten what made it the jewel of Asia in the first place. So first of all, this great strategic geographical location. There's a reason the British chose Hong Kong as their APEC powerhouse. It is the gateway not just to China, but the whole of Southeast Asia. It has a far better climate than these competing knowledge economies. It has a far more liberal lifestyle than these competing knowledge economies. And research shows that actually Hong Kong is the place in the world where Western and Asian philosophies most naturally meet and toggle, which is a huge advantage. So the question I want to pose to everyone sort of watching this is, how do we re-leverage the above? And I think there are three possible futures for Hong Kong. The first is it remains the gateway to China. It becomes the gateway to the whole of Southeast Asia. And as the previous talk suggested, sort of becomes the NASDAQ of the Greater Bay Area. But there are less good futures. One is it becomes a second-tier city. It loses the gateway to China status to competing Chinese city or to Singapore. And Singapore is already investing in this. They have better levels of English and tendency to that, a widespread fluency in Mandarin, and there's much more money being spent in developing the people and progressive modes of education. Or a talent-starved marginality. So actually Hong Kong loses all its attractiveness to overseas talent and fails to establish a system capable of developing its own future-ready talent. So here are three possible futures. So let's look at which one might be most likely by looking at the conditions of the future and the COVID amplification. So I'm going to look at this three dimensions. So first of all, digital transformation, secondly, innovation, and thirdly, VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and how they all specifically impact Hong Kong. So first of all, what is digital transformation? It's often misunderstood. It's not switching from analog to digital technology. It's not finding new digital business strategies, but it's the human adaptation to the digital world. And the leading indicators for digital transformation are the US and the UK worldwide. They self-report as being the most digitally transformed societies in the world, and Hong Kong and Singapore and APAC. So the output of digital transformation doesn't actually look that good at the moment. We're not doing it very well. So there's a fragmentation of attention. There's an amplificator. People are sort of attracted to the digital and they're not focusing so much on the physical world or on the human world. As part of that, there's an amplification of belief, emotion, and behavior, and these are not necessarily good beliefs, emotions, and behavior. So feeling is becoming stronger. And this is materializing in the division of society. So one group will hope for a better world that once existed, and another group is hoping for a better world not yet created. And these groups demonize the other side. They have stopped talking to each other. So in all of these societies, you're seeing increasing potential for violence. You can see it in the US, you can see it in the UK, you can see it in Hong Kong, and potentially you can start seeing it in Singapore. So secondly, we're looking at that as the future state of these societies. And within these societies, there's also innovation going on. And the built environment has to sort of properly understand innovation as well. So empowering innovation, well, there are four types, and empowering, sustaining, efficiency, and disruptive. Empowering innovation is the ability to transform expensive products into affordable ones. I don't think the built environment is particularly interested in that. Sustaining innovation, replacing older models with new ones, this is a driving force in the built environment. Efficiency innovation, reducing or simplifying the delivery of something. So we heard a little bit about that in the previous talk. How do we make the real estate industry more efficient? Now, it's important to realize that this costs jobs. So when you're doing this, it actually gets rid of jobs. So it's not fully sustainable in itself. And then most importantly, disruptive innovation. Gaining a foothold in the low-end market that's ignored by established companies, or establishing a completely new market, turning non-customers into customers. And I think this is an important focus for built environment, and I think this is how it's going to be attacked. So before I go into the attack, let's just look at Hong Kong and how it's become the amplified heart of VUCA, so volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So Hong Kong, the VUCA-ness of Hong Kong has been bookended by SARS and COVID-19. So SARS sort of started the way we looked at real estate in Hong Kong, and the way it became a sort of a major element of Hong Kong's growth and the behaviours in Hong Kong related to it. COVID-19 is hitting us again, and we're seeing similar kind of challenges. We've got other VUCA conditions in Hong Kong. So it's experiencing 3 VUCA events just beyond COVID. So first of all, there's the US-China trade war. Secondly, the social unrest, which has already been talked about. And thirdly, which we can't get rid of, the long-term VUCA conditions of the 50-year handover, something that was done under best intentions, but is creating uncertainty and ambiguity. We don't know what the future will look like. And there's a behavioural output to these conditions. So there's a tendency to hold on to known things and to ignore unknown things. So you won't invest into anything that is slightly risky. You will only invest in things that are less risky or known to give money and profit in previous conditions. Sadly, this leaves the system extremely fragile when things come under attack from disruptive innovations. And I think big tech is coming for Hong Kong real estate. And I think that is the disruptive innovation that Hong Kong real estate and the built environment needs to be taking seriously. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, there's going to be a disruptive attack. And I think big tech players are going to start to sell the following to potential clients, potential MNCs, etc. They're going to sell the idea that work from home has seen improved productivity and engagement in the workforce. And it definitely did. There isn't an argument there. Initially, the reports were around the world of increased productivity and engagement, and the pre-existing research would have predicted that. They will also say that even though this might not be consistent, and actually this might be dropping in some areas and some practices, they will be able to make the technologies and design the methodologies that can further enhance these boosts in productivity and engagement. So it's a disruptive piece of tech. It's not ready yet, but all of their tech will increase the performance as we go on. So invest in it now and get a performance boost later. So they will argue that your people will work harder, they will be more engaged, and it will cost you far less because you will not have to pay excessive corporate real estate costs. This is empirical evidence that is showing that work from home is working, and the previous concerns are things that can be thrown away. We cannot deny that for some, if not many people, it is improving productivity and engagement, at least in the short term. So if that's a disruptive attack, what is the battle place? So first of all, the cityscape itself. So some reports are suggesting that foot traffic is down 52 to 65% in some cities. And that's a cost to the central business district of 10 million. This is current Australian data. There's a direct cost to business of 7 billion and a cost to productivity of 3 billion. So this is the first part of the battle place. The second is the office itself. Workplaces are looking to reduce their capacity by 50% to 60%, according to CBRE's research. And the third part of the battle place is actually the consultancies and the tech firms coming together to produce a future vision, which is a seamless analysis of what business will look like. More autonomy, more remote work, much happier workers, more accessible leadership, all facilitated by technology. This is going to be sold to all of the people who are buying real estate around the world. And the weapons that are going to be brought are behavioural. So big tech for years has been focusing on behavioural sciences. And their past behaviours show that they will use this data and this evidence and their technologies, and they will happily misinterpret it and manipulate it to gain customers. While I think they had best intentions initially, they are not necessarily following them in how they try and grow their markets. So my argument here is big tech has nuclear weapons when it comes to trying to attack the corporate real estate industry. It is all going to be behavioural. But sadly, in my experience, very, very few people working in corporate real estate and built environment or in Hong Kong itself are equipped with the knowledge to compete with the behavioural science weaponry of big tech. So I think we have a penknife. So that frames the battle. And the big question I have, given those three sort of scenarios, is what happens to Hong Kong if big tech persuades senior leaders that wide-scale work from home is a plausible future. So this 50 to 60% of corporate real estate demands happens. There is a huge demand for knowledge workers capable of thriving when working from home. There's a huge necessity for home environments conducive to work from home. You need to actually be able to be in a space where work from home is possible. And there needs to be a massive reimagination of non-work from home space to provide opportunities for connection, collaboration, learning, and personal flourishing. How do you become a better human and a more healthy human? And I will ask the question to the audience, is Hong Kong even slightly ready for the above scenario? So I'm going to look at sort of a lot of the deeper behavioural data, because this is what I think the built environment and corporate real estate needs to understand. And it's a fog of war at the moment. It's all misty. And there are three dimensions to this. So first of all, well-being, so the well-being of people in the society. Secondly, sort of the deep diving into work from home. And then finally, what do we mean when we're talking about performance and productivity? So well-being research, and I'm starting here with pre-COVID research because lots of the well-being sort of data is being biased by the COVID stuff. So well-being around the world has not been in a particularly good place even prior to COVID. So the Society for Human Resource Management has calculated that actually unexpected absenteeism cost an organisation 16.7% of its payroll in direct costs and lost productivity annually. This can cost employers $225.8 billion annually in the US, or $1,685 per employee. So there's a real cost to poor well-being. Again, looking at the idea that the US is the most digitally transformed society in the world and is a leading indicator for pretty much everything around digital transformation, including well-being. Between 45 to 77% of US workers are chronically ill. So this is something that might happen elsewhere in the world. This level of illness is costing the US economy $1.5 trillion in annual healthcare and employees up to $6 trillion in lost productivity. This leads to the World Economic Forum predicting that US Medicare will go bankrupt by 2026 and their entire social service system by 2034. Okay, a leading indicator for the world, this might also happen here. So actually in Hong Kong, we are seeing similar trends. So the reports of poor mental health in Hong Kong increased 5 times during the social unrest. The younger generation were the most deeply impacted. The US is reporting a 1,000% increase in emotional distress during COVID. 9 in 10 Hong Kongers are reporting the same. Depression, mental illness, and suicide in young people has been rising significantly worldwide since 2013 and the saturation of social media. This is a behavioural knock-on of digital transformation. So it's a crisis in the making, and it's a crisis that all countries on the leading edge of digital transformation, and as I argued previously, Hong Kong is one of the 2 APAC economies that has to start taking seriously. This is a crisis in the making, especially if you're a knowledge economy. You cannot do good knowledge work well if you have a highly stressed, mentally disabled workforce. We'll go into the work from home and again the pre-COVID research. This is everywhere in the media, this is everywhere in everything you're reading. And I think the best way to sum up a lot of the kind of stuff you're reading about work from home is it's answering questions you don't actually have. It's important to know that there was a huge amount of research on work from home that pre-existed COVID. And I'm going to try and outline it here to sort of show, because all of this research is predicting exactly what we are seeing. Nobody's reading it, nobody's accessing it because everybody's trying to sell work from home solutions. But this is all established research that is predicting exactly what is unfolding in front of us. So first of all, there's psychological research, and psychological research basically says some people will work from home better than others. I don't think that's a particularly genius discovery. Some people are more suited to that than others, and we can go beyond that. More interesting is sociological research. Some organisations, systems and cultures are more supportive of remote work than others. And this is important to know because if you don't actually have an organisational system that supports it, you will not see the engagement and productivity increases. More important still, social psychological. High performance work absolutely requires informality of communication. And this is what companies are struggling with, that they cannot mimic the informal communication with digital technology. And until that is solved, it is not going to do the full job. Performance will drop. Neuroscience. Humans are social animals. If work from home ends up in social isolation, that will predict poor well-being more accurately than smoking and obesity. All of the data I've given you before will increase. We will see a downfall in well-being. And then you've got the environmental, technological, and leadership management stuff. Work from home requires certain types of environments. big office spaces, comfortable furniture, good technology, and you actually need to have a management and leadership system that supports it. So the research that we've done around this outlines the challenges. So first of all, people working from home are thriving or barely surviving, and a grey area in between. So for some, the experience is engaging and energizing. They're experiencing freedom, flexibility and focus, and better comfort and meaning. And that will drive the performance and productivity and engagement data we've seen before. But many others are barely surviving. They're finding the experience overwhelming and isolating. So they feel overwhelmed, they feel that they're socially isolated, they're lonely, they're struggling mentally, and they feel a loss of purpose and gratification. There's no meaning in their work. So you can see this as a spectrum. Both things are going on simultaneously. When you look at why this is the case, why are people barely surviving? So they think, well, I don't have any informal communication anymore. I don't have any physical face-to-face interactions. This is making me stressed. The excessive virtual meetings are causing persistent fatigue. I'm tired all the time. I'm being watched in my own home by my office. I don't actually have any private space anymore. When I'm doing the work, the technology is not adequate, and I don't actually have comfortable furniture to do it on. And I'm having to rapidly switch between work and home personae, and I'm bringing work into the home, and that's not comfortable for me. And then underneath it, reflective-emotive data. So this is the deeper stuff people are thinking. And this will really frame the leadership challenge. So there's a feeling that leaders have done no scenario planning and are completely unprepared for any future VUCA events. This came as a shock, no one was ready for it, and maybe that's going to be a long-term scenario. The lack of empathy, that leaders are not feeling any compassion or empathy for their employees, and they're unconcerned about well-being in general. So they just will let employees carry on doing what they're doing. Cost cutting. Well, we haven't invested in the requisite technologies for the digital era. Distrust, that even if those that are thriving, they will not be listened to, and we will go back to business as usual once the experience of COVID has gone. Lack of awareness, and this is a key one, that leaders are unaware or uncaring about the context of the work from home challenge and are quite happy for hours to mount up to extreme levels as long as business as usual processes are maintained. And finally, uninformed decisions, that actually significant decisions about the future might be made based on unreliable data drawn from an extreme situation. And the critical finding really in the research we've done is performance does not equal productivity. So productivity seems to be going up, but performance seems to be in decline. So productivity basically is hours worked, time taken and errors made. So if you're just looking at how many hours people are working, people seem to be working more hours working from home. But that actually does not relate to good work in knowledge work environments. We need to look at the connective, the unmeasured, and the informal. That is important for knowledge work. What we're seeing with this increased amount of time is just people being on the system, answering emails, going to business as usual meetings. They're not doing any of the value-adding stuff. And so within this, we're saying, well, how do you start creating an environment in which people can do value-adding stuff? And here are 4 different ways you can do that. So first of all, salutogenesis. This is a question of how do you design environments to support human health and well-being. It's the opposite of pathogenesis. So pathogenesis is you only intervene when someone is already mentally ill. So how do we design environments to prevent that from happening, to enable flourishing from the off? High-quality connections. We've lost this. We are not getting high-quality connections in Zoom meetings. So how do you design technologies of connections and communications that energize people and enable people rather than drain them of energy? Contextually appropriate design. How do you design environments that merge corporate culture, professional requirements, and local sensibilities? So how do you actually create an environment where all of the multi-dimensions of knowledge work can happen? And finally, dimensions of work. How do you actually, what are the dimensions of knowledge work, and how do you design to deal with them? And the dimensions of work themselves is focus work. The time spent on the measurable outcomes you're paid to achieve. you're in front of a computer, you're writing a document, you're coding, something like that. Learning work, the time spent on self-improvement. Connection work, the time spent on building relationships and trust. Collaboration work, the time spent on solving a complex situation, when you're actually just, how are we solving this problem? And you're talking together rather than sitting on a computer. Shallow work, the time spent on admin, comms, business as usual reporting and meetings, etc. And finally, life work. How much time are you able to spend on your family, your community, leisure time, other non-work activities? All of these need to be taken into consideration when you are designing space. And paradoxically, it seems the amount of time one can spend exploring the passions of life, family, sport, culture, community, the higher value add one brings to work. So when we're designing environments, we actually need to design around all aspects of life. So a plausible future, if any of this is possible, what is the plausible future? So first of all, the Covid amplification. What has it actually done? Well, it's sped up digital transformation. Many organizations have completed undreamed of levels of transformation in a matter of months. But this is not just good. It's actually amplified fears and anxieties. It's made the future less clear and more scary. We need to throw away our predetermined ideas about work. We don't know what the future will look like. Anyone who says they do is either mad or lying. But it's also illustrated how collectively brilliant our people can be in conditions of emergence. We saw how incredibly well people could solve complex situations. Digital transformation itself. So everything has the potential to be seen by everyone. There is a radical transparency in the world. Everyone can theorize as to the reason, so opinion can be fact. Sadly, VUCA events are being treated as planned events. So this is the sort of rise of conspiracy theory. What caused that, rather than it was just a complex, uncertain activity. And then everybody is searching desperately for meaning, the echo chamber communities we're seeing rising. But we've also, through digital transformation, we can employ everybody's brain in sense-making, ideation, and problem-solving. We can connect more people with each other than has ever been possible before. And the more brains and the more diversity of input, the better the solutions. This is extended intelligence, and this is possible. And I think Hong Kong's unique geography of thought, the place in the world where East most meets West, is going to be a huge advantage in the future. And finally, a future of what? I don't like to say just a future of work, because that goes into a technologically deterministic solution. The future of leadership, the future of organization, the future of built environment, the future of Hong Kong. And it's about creating the conditions for beautiful emergence, creating new ways of doing things, new ways of being, new ways of doing business, new technologies, new innovations. There are a number of things in the research that talk about this, and I've just put question marks after all of them because I don't want to predict the future. But ecosystem leadership, collaborative, which is actually having everyone in an organization involved in the process of leadership. Collaborative strategies, collaborating with partners in strategic direction. Emergent practices, no such thing as best practice, everything is developing. Technologies that augment human performance, and complex adaptive systems that everything impacts everything else, and the linearity and of transactional work has gone. So I don't think the future is going to be underpinned by the science of business administration. We're going to have to start using a different language. I think it's going to be underpinned by complexity science, which deals with VUCA, and a deep, broad, and rich understanding of human behavior. And hopefully in this talk, I've outlined really how the built environment and corporate real estate can try and engage with that deep, rich understanding of human behavior to to fight off the advances of big tech and some of the negative things that big tech is bringing with it. Thank you.